Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the product registration changes impacting horticulture and field crops. Caitlin very consciously made sure that we were aware that it was also going to cover field crops today. So thank you, Caitlin. So today, joining me, we have our lineup of commodity specialists, including Michelle Cortens, our tree fruit specialist, Talia Plaskett, our cannabis and protected crop specialist, field crops, as I mentioned, Caitlin Congdon. Hugh Lyu is our wild blueberry and cranberry specialist. Rosalie Gillis-Madden, vegetable specialist. Sonny Murray is our berry specialist. And then I'm happy to introduce today a new addition to our team, Dustin MacLean, who's doing our field plant pathology, as well as covering general horticulture in northeastern Nova Scotia. So today we're happy to host this Q&A, which we did last year with our 7 Perennia commodity specialists on product registration changes and up-to-date use pattern information. The format today is really informal, so at any point in time, then pop your questions in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that as well as the chat, and we'll address them at the breaks in the session or kind of after a question period or a certain section. Any that we're not able to get in on our 1-hour session today, then we'll address in our follow-up email, and we're taking notes of those questions as well. So we'll send that information out afterwards. The webinar is a Nova Scotia Environment course number T2105, and as we're at 1 point in the labeling category, and you must attend the entire session to receive the points, and I'll pop up some information on that at the end. As I said, then I'll just pop the link in at the very end there. In case we have any out of province or country participants joining us today, I just want to acknowledge that this information was compiled for Nova Scotia growers. So while most of it would be applicable to other provinces, there may be some exceptions. And so if you do have any questions or concerns about information that was shared today, then just reach out to your local ag reps. And of course, we always remind people to read the label before using a product at any point in time. And the most recent labels can always be found on the PMRA website or by using the pesticide label app search on your phones. And I'll post in here in the chat in a second, the link where you can find more information, as I mentioned, on the pesticide label search function. So I'm going to jump right into it today. And I'm going to actually start off by asking Michelle a few questions. And so, as I said, it's really informal. I'm going to go around the table with some questions that we have already had submitted to us. And then if you have additional questions or want more information on any particular product that we're touching on, then please include it in the Q&A in the chat. So Michelle, a few of our specialists are going to highlight the recent label amendments, but last year you had mentioned in particular, folpet was a fungicide similar to Captan and that it would be used in apple orchards. In your tree fruit guide, you say to transition to newly amended folpet labels this year. So what changes were made in 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. So folpet, which is sold under the product name Folpan, which people might recognize, or also Follow has now come onto the market as well. So they have some newly amended labels that took effect in January of this year. So we can expect to have to follow those changes this coming season. So basically, Health Canada updated the re-entry interval. They saw that there was some occupational health risks that they wanted to address by giving a longer time for that product to kind of dissipate. So for apples, for example, the old label had a general re-entry of 24 hours. Now we're looking at a re-entry interval that's kind of dependent on the management activity. So we've got 6 days for hand thinning fruit now, which is quite a bit longer than the 24 hours from before. But we do have 24 hours for hand harvesting, which would be the same. But then we actually have a reduction to 12 hours for all other activities other than the ones that were mentioned. Also new to apples is a minimum reapplication interval of 10 days. In the past, there was no reapplication interval specified. So if this product is being used for apple scab, say during that kind of 5 to 7 day application interval, be sure to watch that you have to wait 10 days to reapply that product now. Luckily, we do have the same number of applications per season. So we're capped at 6 applications per season. So there was no change in that sense. Yeah, so I really just wanted to mention this because with the changes to Captan last season, a lot of people kind of started incorporating folpet into their spray schedule. So just want to make sure that they're aware of those changes that are new to this year. Folpet's also registered in grapes, strawberries, cranberries, field vegetables, and ornamental crops, whether or not it's actually used in all of those cases, but just be aware if you use that product to check the updated labels for this year.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Over to you, Talia. So I know that there's not necessarily a huge host of products registered in cannabis, but are there any particular label changes of those that are existing registered products that you want producers to be aware of?
Yes. So we did see a handful of changes to products from 2021. So I'm just going to run through those quickly here. So for millstop, we see a differentiation of the application rate that can be used for indoor and outdoor production. So for those of you who are managing both, that's an important thing to look out for. We also see the expansion of the label for Root Shield HC biological fungicide to include foliar applications against botrytis, and saw the addition of spider mite control to the label for Bioceres. Pure Spray FX now can be used in field production of cannabis, and this label expansion was also seen for Regalia Max as well.
Great, thank you very much, Talia. And I'm going to pop back over to you, Michelle, just to ask if there's been any significant label amendments expected soon or in 2023 that the tree fruit growers should be made aware of right now as they start to do their planning.
Yeah, so I'm talking a lot up front here because I have a lot to say about label amendments, especially for the tree fruit industry. So like a lot of other growers, the apple growers are going to be expecting changes to the use of Imidan in the 2023 season though. I just want to make that clear. It's not this year, but it's next year. So the biggest changes will be that all hand thinning activities have to be completed prior to application. So I don't want people to make that mistake of putting Imidan on and then hoping to hand thin trees, because that would not be an option anymore. So just be very careful that if you're treating for codling moth or apple maggot, that you're done your hand thinning activities or that you don't plan to do them again in the 2023 season. The other thing is that the re-entry interval for hand harvesting is going to be extended from 14 days to 22 days. So they added on just a couple more days to wait there for hand harvesting. So that's a change to look out for Imidan. But then another product that's going to have significant changes coming in again in 2023 is Mancozeb, which is sold under the product names Manzate, Dithane, and Pencozeb. So we're looking at a revised re-entry interval of 35 days for hand thinning. And that's not a mistake. It is 35 days for hand thinning. That's up from the 24-hour re-entry interval that we're accustomed to. So we're going from 24 hours to 35 days. So this product is going to be very restricted. We're also going to be restricted to a maximum of 4 applications per year. And when this change was kind of announced by the PMRA, we weren't sure if maybe we could get more applications in if we were applying a half rate as opposed to a full rate. But what they're actually putting on the label is that you can only apply 4 times a year. So even if it's a half rate, you're still legally restricted to 4 applications per year. So that's going to be the maximum. These are some big changes, but Mancozeb was originally proposed for cancellation. So we're at least kind of happy that the product will still be available, even though we've got these very significant restrictions and mitigation measures. So just want to reiterate, these changes will not take effect this year, but it's something we should be aware of that's coming in 2023.
Okay, great. So it won't be reflected in your pest guide updates this year, but next winter, stay tuned to that update should happen then. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Michelle. So we're going to move on to a section on product cancellations. And in some cases, we know products are canceled or they're being proposed for cancellation. So Rosie, I'm going to pop over to you and ask if you can tell us a little bit about the end of Lorsban.
Sure. Yeah, I think Caitlin probably covered Lorsban in last year's session, but it's a monumental change in how we manage cabbage maggot, among other pests. It's being canceled because of environmental risks and risk to human health. So there's not really there's not much argument you can make about that. So the last date of sale by the registrant was last December. And so retailers can continue to sell it until this December. And I'm not sure many retailers have any Lorsban left in stock that can be bought for next year's use, but it's worth asking. So growers can continue to apply it until December 2023. Although if you're applying Lorsban in December, we need to talk. Growers should have a plan for 2024. There's a couple of other products registered for cabbage maggot. So a spinosad was registered in 2018, so that's in trust or success. But we haven't seen widespread adoption. And there's also Verimark, which is cyantranolyprol, which was registered a few years ago as well. Spinosad for cabbage maggot control can be applied in the greenhouse only, so you have to plan ahead. You put it on over the top of the transplants and then you immediately wash the foliage off so that it drives it into the potting media. And then there's a 24-hour REI before it can be transplanted into the field. For things like rutabaga, Verimark is applied as a narrow band in furrow over the seed. For transplants of broccoli and cabbage and things like that, Verimark can be applied as an in-furrow spray, as a banded surface application at transplant or in the transplant water. Most laborers don't really like to have it in the transplant water, so I'd be sure to check in with your laborer on their comfort with some of these pesticides. The goal of Verimark is to get it in the root zone so it can be optimized for root uptake, and it doesn't move in the soil very well, so you really have to target it right at that root zone. Good crop rotation should still be the backbone of any cabbage maggot plan, of course, and there's also lots of other IPM strategies like netting and fencing, which if anyone wants to talk about, please give me a call. There's also some work being done with sterile fly release, where you have male flies that can mate but don't pass on viable DNA. And this can help reduce populations. So this is early research. And it's being done on onion maggot in Quebec and Ontario, but that's a cousin of cabbage maggot. So hopefully some new technologies will be coming to help us control this really challenging pest.
Great, thanks so much, Rosie, for that. Sonny, over to you. Are there any significant cancellations in berries that you think our growers would like to know about in Nova Scotia?
So there's really only one, and it revolves around admire and soil application. In the past, I really liked to use admire for soil application, because once you get admire in the soil away from UV light, you have a very long residual, so you don't have to worry about things for a little while. But the soil application for admire has been canceled for high bush blueberries, caneberries, and strawberries. We normally used it for control of aphids and European Schaefer larvae. So after April 11th, 2022, we cannot use admire for soil application for these berry crops. We can still put it on foliar for control of aphids and leafhoppers. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Sonny. And so I think every year we try to put out something on the control of aphids. So I'm guessing that will be a big update in that document on how you suggest management practices going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely stay tuned, everyone. All right, so we're gonna dive in a little bit on one of the hotter topics in industry right now. So I'm gonna go to you, Dustin, to tell us a little bit about Bravo. So I know that it was recently approved for continued registration, but we're hearing about a proposed cancellation for the year of 2023. So could you, fill us in on what's being said?
Yeah, so Health Canada's, the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, PMRA, they initiated a special review of chlorothalonil in 2018. And they were also looking at information from the 2016 European Food Safety Authority report with respect to chlorothalonil. So subsequent to the initiation of the special review, PMRA became aware of the European Union's decision to prohibit all uses of chlorothalonil as plant protectant products, mostly because of human health concerns as well as environmental concerns. So that was done in 2019. So certain aspects of concern identified by the EU have been included in the special review. So the remaining aspects of concern were previously addressed as part of the reevaluation of chlorothalonil that was completed in 2018. So based on the review submitted, as well as from the European Food Safety Report for chlorothalonil, Health Canada identified potential changes to environmental fate and ecotoxicological endpoints an area of concern. So additionally, the 2019 European Commission decision on the renewal of plant protection products containing chlorothalonil identified several areas of concern. So these were potential exposure to a number of metabolites from groundwater, potential genotoxicity of chlorothalonil metabolites, potential carcinogenicity of chlorothalonil, and potential risk to amphibians and fish. So Health Canada is basically proposing continued registration only of greenhouse ornamentals and mushrooms, like in-house mushrooms, for Canada. So all other uses of chlorothalonil are proposed for cancellation, since potential risks to human health and the environment were not shown to be acceptable when the products were used according to the current conditions of registration. So all food uses of chlorothalonil are proposed for cancellation, and all maximum residue limits, so MRLs, are proposed for revocation. So basically, they're proposing by 2023 that chlorothalonil will be deregistered on all products except for in-house mushrooms and greenhouse ornamentals.
Wow, that is huge. And a lot of us have been involved in the previous, when they were considering deregistering it before, or it was under review, then we had been involved in that consultation. So I think this is, we were happy to get what we had gotten last time. So I think that we're definitely anxious about what this means for industry, because it's used in so many crops and it's been such an important fungicide. So for those that don't know how broad the registration was, Dustin, do you mind kind of commenting on that, since what they're proposing is so narrow going forward?
Yeah, so basically, so chlorothalonil was used on a lot of crops. So to give you an idea of the crops that chlorothalonil was used on, like we're talking about asparagus, high bush blueberries, low bush blueberries, carrots, celery, sweet and sour cherries, chickpeas, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage, conifers, so all outdoor and nursery conifers, sweet corn, cranberry, cantaloupe, muskmelon, honeydew, squash, pumpkin, watermelon, cucumber, evening primrose, ginseng, hazelnuts, lentils, onions, greenhouse ornamentals other than roses, outdoor ornamentals, parsnip, dry pea, peach and nectarine, mushroom houses, potatoes, both seed and table, strawberry, tomato, turf, and wheat. So basically all of those, registration on all of those crops will be revoked, with the exception of, like I said, mushroom houses and greenhouse ornamentals. So that's a lot of crops. And to give you an idea, like for each of these crops, like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, like the cabbage and cauliflowers, it's used to control both alternaria and downy mildew. Say in tomatoes, it's used for early blight, late blight, septoria leaf spot, anthracnose, and botrytis gray mold. It's tank mixed with a number of other fungicides, like it's used in conjunction with Ridamil Gold, both 480 EC and 480 SL, to control late blight, early blight, botrytis vine rot, and suppression of storage rots, and pythium and pink rot. In vegetable crops, it's used for wild blueberries and for Phomopsis canker, leaf spot, disease suppression, septoria leaf spot control, rust, and Validicinia leaf spot. So it's used on dozens and dozens of crops, and it's used on dozens and dozens of pathogens that affect those crops. Another major worry is, so chlorothalonil, if you don't know about it too much, so it's a contact and protectant fungicide, and it has a multi-site mode of action. So it's a class M. So basically a multi-site mode of action, it means that this fungicide has, it inhibits disease growth by affecting multiple different, say, biological or biochemical functions. So a lot of, if it's removed, we'll mostly have to rely on single site mode of action fungicides. So things like the class 3 triazoles, the class 7 carboxamides, the class 11 strobilurin's. The risk with that is that repeated use of these fungicides, especially if they're not rotated properly or they're used a lot, you can develop resistance very, very quickly. So there is a number of diseases already, pathogens that have resistance to a number of the class 3 triazoles, to a number of the class 11 strobilurin's, and this resistance can develop very, very quickly within a few years. So by removing chlorothalonil from these fungicide rotations, a lot of these crops, especially because they're specialty, things like ginseng, primrose, they're not grown in a large abundance. They have very few registered fungicides to begin with. So now you might have the option of only being able to rotate between 2 fungicides. And those are single site fungicides. So your risk of developing resistance increases dramatically. And if anybody that's dealt with minor use registrations understands it's sometimes very, very difficult to get new fungicides registered for some of these specialty crops, because as far as the companies are concerned, sometimes the money's just not there to make it feasible for them to actually get these things registered. So it's very, very scary when you look at the number of crops that are affected and the number of diseases that chlorothalonil was used or used in conjunction with other fungicides to control.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that overview, Dustin. From my time as berry specialist in Sonny's position, then I know it was definitely a significant product that we used to recommend in managing a lot of different diseases. And Hugh, I know that you're next on my list, but I just transitioned really quickly into Sonny, but I'll go back to you, so don't worry. How do you see the proposed deregistration of Bravo affecting berry growers, Sonny?
Yeah, so chlorothalonil, it's sold as Bravo Reco in berry crops. It's not registered on raspberries, but blueberries, it has activity on mummyberry, phomopsis, anthracnose, botrytis, alternaria fruit rot. In strawberries, it has activity on anthracnose, botrytis, leaf spot, leaf scorch, phonopsis, crown rot. So a lot of times we think we're putting it on for botrytis, but we're really catching some of these other diseases, lateral damage. It's really been the backbone or the workhorse of our fungicide program. You think back through the years, it's always been 2 Bravos first thing in the spring, and then you put another one on in the fall. And we got through that, last review, being able to hang on to those registrations. It's kind of disappointing to be able to, come through that and lose it now. It's a great product to rotate with newer technologies, as Dustin said, to mitigate the risk of resistance development. It's a contact fungicide that you put on before there's even fruit there. So residue levels on the fruit itself, isn't a huge concern because it's a contact product and you're putting it on, like I said before, there's even fruit there. So it's very safe for the consumer. I just hate to lose a tool out of the toolbox when we know it's been a great product for many years and very low risk to developing resistance. So we have other products, but this is the backbone. This is a great product that we could potentially lose. Hate to see that happen. It's important to note that we do have it for 2022, but after that, it's really what's in question. So encourage growers to use it this year, but long term, I think we have to stand up for this or we're going to lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sonny. And Hugh, in wild blueberries, do you mind commenting on what the alternative uses or alternative products could be to replace Bravo in their product rotations?
Yeah, so as Sunny and Dustin introduced all those information and background information, especially on the European Union, that is our biggest wild blueberry export market. So since 2018 and 19, we have faced this problem. We have come up with solutions, and many growers already move away from Bravo with this change in the European Union. We do have some other products that can replace that, but as Sunny said, Bravo is such a great product. Like, if growers are still using Bravo, they are mainly selling berries to North America. But in the future, if they want to move away from that, you also have such as Pro 9 480 SC and other products. We have all those products in our pest management guide there. So I would encourage people, if you are one of those people still using Bravo in wild blueberry production, you can check out our pest guide and or ask me, we can discuss what is the best solution for you. But that is such an important product for our leaf disease control, and especially in our sprout year production fields. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Hugh. And before we move on from Bravo, I'll give the audience a chance to ask any questions about it. And then Dustin, if you don't mind just commenting, I saw you added it in the chat there, but what growers can do at this point in the process of the evaluation. Oh, you're muted, Dustin.
Sorry, I missed the unmute button there.
That's okay.
So Health Canada will accept written comments on the proposal. Originally, it was up to 48 or 45 days from the date of publication of the document. So that's been extended now till the 11th of May, 2022. So I provided the link in there. So they request that you go through some steps before you just submit comments. So what they would like is for you to request the full consultation document to read the scientific evaluation that is the basis of the proposed regulatory decision. So you can find that evaluation on the first link that I sent. And then after you've read that and you've gone through it, if you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, maybe there's, I've gone through the document myself. It's pretty thorough. It goes through a lot of different things, the effects on groundwater, the effects on amphibians, the effects on human health when it's consumed for different age groups, how it affects, say, children compared to adults and what the limit is. But a lot of their, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of their data, there is gaps, there is missing areas. There's a few areas where they've made assumptions based on basically if they did a scientific study and they came to a certain result, they've sometimes taken that data and made assumptions that if A is true, then B must be true, where they haven't actually done a study on B. So there is a bit of wiggle room if you go through to question some of what they've done and potentially say, well, even if A is true, that doesn't mean B is not, necessarily true. So at the very least, they may have to do some additional studies to support their results. And they suggested that all comments and information received during the public comment period will be considered before making a final special review decision. Registrants and stakeholders are encouraged to provide information that may address uncertainties in the available information database of chlorothalonil before the end of the consultation period for consideration in the final special review decision. So that's kind of what I was talking about, these uncertainties where they've made assumptions based on research studies that may not necessarily have fit what the narrative that they were trying to portray. So the evaluation of any additional data will be based on the scientific merit and relevance to the risk assessment. While additional data may reduce uncertainty in the risk assessment, continued registration of any use would be based on the acceptability of risk assessed using a science-based approach. So basically, if you make any comments and there's people have major uncertainties, I have a feeling that they may do additional research studies to try to address those uncertainties. But I provide the link so that in the first link, you'll be able to read what's going on. I'll tell you it's a rather lengthy document. There's a lot of scientific technical information. It's probably about 20 or 30 pages at least, I think. And then once you finish that, in the second link, you can there's some information to contact PMRA, either through writing or through email, basically just to assess your concerns.
Great, thank you
That's
again.
all we can do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I think everyone's voice matters in something like this. So we definitely encourage everyone to send in some comments and to participate in the review process. And I know that in addition to the comments that we made here today, then Dustin and several of the specialists have prepared information on their blogs specific to the potential deregistration to Bravo related to their specific commodities. So definitely check those out for more crop specific info. And now before we move on from the product cancellation discussion, then Caitlin, how would the proposed deregistration of, oh my goodness, fluvesinet, you're going to have to say that probably better for me, affect producers in field crops?
Flufenicet, I think. And to keep it simple, very little. So flufenicet was the active ingredient in herbicides like Axiom or Define, which would have been used on corn and soybeans, but have pretty more or less been phased out and replaced anyways. So kind of the replacements that we already have for those in group 15, which would have been Define. We have Dual and Zidua, and Axiom was a group 5 and 15, so a dual mode of action. And we have Primextra 2 Magnum for that. So not a big deal, kind of a good news story. And carry on.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. So Talia, I'm going to pop over to you here to ask or to answer a question or to give us some information, but I just wanted to preface it by saying there's a lot of different ways that we can get or assist growers in getting products in their hands. And one of those ways is through what we call an mule, but Talia, maybe you can expand on what an mule is and how we use it in the industry, but essentially it's just getting something in someone's hand, in growers' hands urgently. So do you mind talking a little bit about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of refer to it as emergency registration, but mule is great too. So it's a great tool to have in our toolbox when it does come to dealing with unexpected or unmanageable problems. So the Minister of Health may register a pest control product or amend the registration of a pest control product to permit its use for emergency control where registered pesticides and cultural control methods are insufficient to address an outbreak. So examples of emergency pest situations might include things like invasion of a new pest, a sudden and significant increase in pest pressure due to environmental or other conditions, or the need for alternative application methods due to adverse weather conditions. So for known or ongoing pest problems where no registered product is available, applicants will be referred to the normal registration process in place to address such situations. So this is a pretty specific sort of process that will not necessarily be the way to go if you are looking for the registration of a product where there's nothing registered. So if you're interested in pursuing something like this, be sure to start with your crop group, industry representative, or Perennia specialist. who can then notify their respective provincial minor use coordinator, and they can work together on finding viable pest management options. And so once that viable option has been identified, an application is submitted to PMRA. And these emergency use registrations only allow for the use of products for 1 year, and they're generally used as a one-off pest outbreak because of weather, export requirements, new pest pressure, et cetera. So like I mentioned, it's a pretty kind of specific guideline as to when you can use that. So there is a good example of this currently in cannabis. So Bioceres WP has been registered for short-term use against rice root aphids. And so if you're checking out the label on the PMRA website, you'll find the amended label. If you continue to scroll down through the document, so you'll find the original label, and then at the bottom, you'll find a second label, which deals with this emergency use. And this second label deals exclusively with application instructions for the emergency registration. And so the scale and the impact of the problem is assessed on a province by province basis. So in this particular case, Saskatchewan, PEI, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland have all identified rice root aphids as a problem and have requested additional products to keep the pest under control. So if you're not listed on that, unfortunately, you can't use this amended label. But as I mentioned, if you're interested in such a thing, then reach out and we can see what we can do about expanding that. And this amended label is applicable to those provinces until June 9th, 2022. So we're already getting pretty close to the end of that emergency registration.
Great, thanks very much, Talia. And Michelle, then last year, I know you'd answered this question, but I think a lot of the growers in the room found it really useful at the time. So maybe if we can get you to answer it again, or can you remind us why the re-entry interval for hand harvesting can be different from pre-harvest intervals, and which interval the grower should follow in that situation?
Yeah, so we're seeing this difference on a lot of new labels recently. So basically we have to think about it from the PMRA and like Health Canada's perspective. So to them, like the pre-harvest interval kind of establishes when enough time has passed for the product to actually break down on the produce, and that it wouldn't like cause a health risk if somebody were to consume that product. So when like that legal period that they've identified on the label has passed, then the residue levels are at safe levels for somebody to consume it. But then kind of what we're interested in terms of like managing, crop production is the re-entry interval for actually harvesting that produce. And from their perspective, what this means is the worker exposure to actually picking that produce. Because those workers are going to be handling large amounts of the crop. And so they're going to be coming into a lot of contact with the residues that are on that crop. So for example, in apples, the label for Captan says that the pre-harvest interval is 7 days. And so after 7 days, somebody could essentially eat that apple and the residues would be at safe levels. But at this point in time, all of the apples are picked by hand. So when we think about the worker exposure, they've identified that there's a longer period of time that we need to wait for those residues to come down to safe levels. So there's different re-entry periods listed on the label that are longer than those 7 days. So in the future, like a shorter pre-harvest interval from like mechanical harvesting might be helpful if we're into like mechanically harvesting apples, but at this time it's not really helpful to us. So we really need to look at the re-entry interval and make sure that it's been that identified period of time that we need to wait for it to be safe for workers. So basically the rule of thumb is to follow the longer of the two intervals and always respect both of those intervals, basically.
Great, thank you very much, Michelle. All right, we're going to move on to the next section here, which is product insights. And we're going to dwell on Sonny's past history in the product world and ask you if you can tell us about changes in formulations that we should know about in 2022.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, we have a few coming up. So there's a new product called the Zivada, which has the same active ingredient as a Matador or silencer that we've all used in the past. It has the same concentration, so you don't have to worry about rate changes, but it has a different carrier, so it doesn't have the same off-putting smell that we saw when we were using a Matador silencer. The next product, Capdan. Capdan's been around for a dog's age, so everybody knows Capdan, but now it's available as a liquid. So all of the same registrations, but now available as a liquid. Looking at the label for strawberries in particular, it's a little bit oddly worded. So it gives the rate as an expression of a dilution, but it doesn't tell you how much water to put on per acre. So it's a little bit odd when you're reading it. So what I did was I went back to the old label, right? So how much active ingredient are we putting on with the old label? So if you're used to putting on, and I have to read this so I get my units right and don't confuse people. So if you're used to putting on 3.5 kilograms per hectare of the dry formulation, you can do the math and you'd be putting on 5.8 liters per hectare of the liquid formulation. And if you read the fine print, there's actually a warning that says do not put more than 5.8 liters per hectare on in a single application. You're allowed 6 applications per year. So that should work out to 2.4 liters per acre. So the wording of it is just a little bit strange, but if you break it down, it makes total sense. So Capdan for berry crops, it's registered on strawberry, raspberry, and blueberry. It's available in a 10-liter jug. I haven't heard a word of totes yet for the larger growers. And the dry formulation is still going to be available. So depending on how you have your sprayer set up, you may want to stick with the old formulation. But just know that the new liquid formulation is available. I think it's going to be great for smaller guys that are measuring out smaller amounts. So that's interesting. Chateau is the last one. Chateau is now available as a liquid. Before it was a dry granular. And again, because it's a liquid now, there's a little bit of a change in the rate. So for strawberries, if you're used to using 85 grams per acre, it's now 90 milliliters per acre. So just know that that's available. In general, just be aware that as you're moving from a granular product to a liquid product, there's going to be a rate change. And, if you're referring back to your old notes, make sure you have your right units and read the label so you can get the new rate. So that's it for formulation changes that I know about.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sonny. And Caitlin, I'm going to hop over to you. What's the difference between the new product Procero Pro and Procero, which we've been using for years now?
Yeah, so Procero, a good standby group 3 fungicide for use on diseases in wheat, barley, and oats. So Procero Pro is just kind of the big sister, I guess, of Procero. So it's adding in an extra active ingredient or an extra mode of action. So now you've got a group 3 and a group 7, which is great for resistance management. It's going to cover all the same diseases that Procero covered. So suppression of Fusarium head blight, control of rusts, powdery mildew. The only thing that Procero Pro adds is spot blotch. And again, the resistance management is the really big thing there. Pretty much the same kind of breakdown. PHI is still 36 days. The reentry interval is the same. The only big change from Procero to Procero Pro is if you end up using it on something that you're going to use for grazing, then the pre-grazing interval increases from 6 to 14 days with Procero Pro.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that insight. Rosie, I'm wondering, with the Lineron saga has had a lot of ups and downs. So where do we stand now?
Well, certainly, it's been a roller coaster, and we've kind of been on the edge of our seats with this one.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to Laura Anderson and Nova Scotia PMUC for really being a champion. So basically, for those who are unfamiliar with the story, There was a hang up at PMRA, and so the Lineron manufacturer missed their production window. And so all of a sudden it was looking like we might not have any Lorax this year at all. But things have kind of been straightened out, but there are going to be shortages. And so there's shortages are nationwide, but as a further flung province, we are going to be feeling the pinch a little bit more than places like Ontario and Quebec. So for carrots, the provinces have joined together for an emergency use registration for TUF, which is pyridate, which is group 6, for post-emerge broadleaf control. They've been doing trials with it in Ontario. It's used in the UK for their carrot programs. So we're optimistic that we'll get good control with minimal crop damage. We're hoping to hear back on that soon. I believe this is the first time an herbicide has gone through an emergency use registration, so we all have our fingers crossed. There may also be a Blazer label expansion. So this is aciflorofen, which is a group 14, coming early in the season for pigweed control. This was a minor use project from a few years ago, I believe. So it's good to see that's finally kind of shaking out. But Blazer is a group 14, so it can be pretty hot. So the recommended rates are pretty low, and growers should be a little cautious with it. For potatoes, Zidua applied as a pre-emerge can provide early season residual suppression. Sencor can provide control as well, but be careful on your coarser soils and use a lower rate. And definitely don't use it if your organic matter is less than 2%. Eptam is another option, but it has to be incorporated. It'll gas off pretty quickly and cause crop damage. So be sure to read the label carefully with any of these products. Always read the label carefully if it's a new use pattern for you. For celery, there isn't any replacement technology so far as I'm aware. So it's just using what you have other than Lorax, so Gezagard and so forth, and hand weeding, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks, Rosie. And Michelle, do you have any insights into the trend of label changes based on some recent product reviews that affect tree fruit?
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, I've just been kind of looking at updating our guide recently, and we've got recent changes to the insecticides Confirm and Matador and the fungicide Sovereign. So with these products, we're keeping the same reentry interval and pre-harvest interval, luckily, but what we're often seeing with like products even beyond the ones that I just mentioned is that we're seeing a lot of updates to like environmental and applicator health, like mitigation measures. So what we're seeing is like new spray buffer zones, precautionary statements about runoff. For applicator health, we're seeing like updated statements about personal protective equipment, statements about spray drift. And then for sovereign fungicide, we're seeing like a reduced maximum number of applications. So I just kind of wanted to use those products as like a case study, because a lot of labels that are kind of coming to my desk, I'm just seeing constantly more risk mitigation measures in these areas. So even if products are going through the kind of the reevaluation process and they're still being deemed acceptable and they can continue with registration, we're still seeing more of these risk mitigation measures. So if you're seeing new labels on your products, just make sure to take a look at those and see if you should be upping your risk mitigation measures.
Great. No, and that's a take home for pretty much every label. I think it is across the board that we're seeing those types of changes. Excellent, thank you. So to end on a positive note and being conscious of time here, then we're going to talk a little bit about new products and uses. So Caitlin, can you explain to us the label expansion or new uses for Valterra?
Yeah, so Valterra is a group 14 herbicide, commonly used in soybeans and corn. And last summer 2021, there was a label expansion to include established alfalfa grown for forage, hay, or seed. So that's maximum 2 applications a year. And it does have a 25-day pre-harvest or pre-grazing interval. But yeah, it's nice to see a good product like that be expanded so we can use it kind of across the farm. But the thing to keep in mind with that is that you still need to be conscious of rotating your herbicides. So when you have something that that you can use on a lot of different crops, it's tempting to go back to that every single year. But you just want to make sure you're still rotating herbicide groups.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. Hugh, the herbicide, I feel like you guys just make these names up for me, but Shakira, I'm not used to saying them, so you can correct me when I'm wrong, but was newly registered in wild blueberries to control certain broadleaf weeds and grasses. Can you talk a little bit about that product?
Yeah, so since we have 2 new herbicides in wild blueberry production, so I'm just going to take the next few minutes to introduce both of them. So just a little bit background on how we select and use herbicides in wild blueberry production, because we are very unique crop. We have some tools in the box already. We constantly test how to fit into our weed management program, but we also like to welcome new products. So this year we have Chikara, Flutosulfion, and Alien in the Z-frame in our toolbox now. So Chikara is a select herbicide for pre-emergency and post-emergency broadleaf and grasses control. That's the general statement in the label. But I was involved with this process to do some trial work to test this product. We only test this mainly for hair fescue because that's our top #1 weed in this production system. So for now, I would only recommend, based on our research, to use this product for your hair fescue control. I use this product for other weed control too, but it didn't seem to give me pro-mixing results. I'm not discouraging people to use it in other weeds, but in a large scale and your whole vegetation management program in your whole 2-year protection cycle, I would only base on whichever the research told us to use. So this is a great product you can 10 mix with Ignite during the sprout year. This is in the springtime of a sprout year and also the fall of the crop year. But one thing, if you are thinking about using this product for this coming spring in your sprout year, just make sure you are monitoring your plant development stage. Don't apply this product too late because that will damage and maybe kill your blueberry plants. So that's one of a great product to have. The other one is Alien in the Z-frame. I wasn't aware of this. Maybe that research was done a couple of years ago. It says on the label, it provides residue control to some broadleaf weeds and pre-emergency to the soil. So that is basically more of a soil seedling control product rather than if you apply this to a mature plant, it won't kill the weeds. So you have to do it pre-emergency to the soil. In terms of the research, I know I haven't come across any researchers present this product to our research wild blueberry meeting. So as of now, I don't know what I can recommend for your it to fit into your management program. But in the future, this, I think it has a great potential to 10 mix with some of your registered product for seedling control. So for example, for hair fescue seeds control to fit into that. But for both products, I would say we just need to wait and have more research to support and guide us to how to fit these 2 products into our weed management program in wild blueberry production. But I have stated and then highlighted all those important information again in our pest guide. I keep advertise my our pest guide here. Just read, and I've highlighted all the important information about these 2 herbicides in the notes. So make sure you read it and be very, very careful of the timing of apply herbicides in your blueberries field. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Hugh. Michelle, similarly, are there any herbicides that are newly registered for use in tree crops?
Yeah, so we've had 2 label expansions of existing products. So, we're familiar with the products Prowl and Assure, but now they can be used in tree fruit. So we've got a label expansion to include apple and pear, but also cherry, nectarine, peach, and plum. So these are different active ingredients from what we've had registered before. but Prowl is a group 3, which we have already had group 3 products, and Assure is a group 1, and we've also already had group 1 products, but it's also good to have these new active ingredients available. So just stay tuned for the weed guide that we'll be publishing soon.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Michelle. Sonny, I'm going to kick it to you, and then I'll let Talia take the last question after that. But if you can comment on any new products in caneberries or blueberries for 2022.
So caneberries, which includes raspberries and blackberries. We have a Danitol, which is not a new product, but received a label expansion for the control of Japanese beetle, leaf hoppers, and spotted wing Drosophila. I couldn't get my hands on a label in time for this meeting, but make sure you check it and look at the pre-harvest interval. If you look at some of the other crops on the label, it's quite long. So don't think that you're going to put it on and harvest the next day. So check that label, make sure you know where it's going to fit into your program. The other product on caneberries is Dual 2 Magnum. Dual 2 Magnum's not a new product, but it's got a label expansion for control of grass and annual weeds and caneberries. You're going to apply it in that herbicide strip on each side of the canes. It's a great addition. So if you don't know Dual 2 Magnum, I think every market garden should have it in its arsenal. It'll control annual grass weeds, but it's also very good on lambscores, pigweed, and ragweed. For high bush blueberries, since I have the floor, we have a label expansion for Maribus Neo for the control of anthracnose and mummyberry. It's got a 30-day pre-harvest interval, and you're only allowed 1 application per year. We also have Closer, which is an insecticide for aphids, leaf hoppers, tarnished plant bug on bushberries, which includes high bush blueberries, 1-day pre-harvest interval, and a maximum of 2 to 3. This is kind of one of those label things. It has a maximum application number of applications dependent on what pest you're going after. So it can either be 2 or 3. And the last one, Entrust, going after blueberry maggot on high bush blueberry, and Entrust is an organic product. So that covers it for new products for berries.
Great. Thanks so much, Sonny. And I put the links in the chat there just before I let you talk there, Talia. Just wanted to remind everyone, because you made a lot of comments on labels there, Sonny, to check out the link on PMRA of the most up-to-date labels. And if you can't find it on there, then any of your dealers should be able to provide you with the most recent label for any product. So make sure that you're checking that out. And so finally, Talia, then what is new for cannabis in 2022?
Yes, I will keep it short and sweet. Basically, we have 2 new registered products, and they are 2 new active ingredients that we haven't seen in cannabis before. So that is pretty exciting. One of the products, let me see, Timerex Gold, active ingredient is tea tree oil. And for a must grow crop biofumigant, we have Oriental mustard seed meal. So it's kind of cool to be able to diversify what we have available. Both of these products can be used in a handful of other crops as well. Berries, grapes, palms, and stone fruit, tomatoes, cucumbers. It's a whole list. It's a whole list. So anyone who's looking to check out some new products, those could be a couple interesting ones.
Awesome. Thanks, Talia. And thank you very much to the whole specialist team here for participating in this session today.